One of the most terrifying wars being fought in the world today isn't in the deserts of the Middle East. It's the war between some feminists, so-called trans-exclusionary radical feminists, or TERFs for short, and transgender people. So why on earth have some feminists gone to war with the trans community? I don't want to give you a comprehensive history of feminism, but basically back in the 1960s, we had the dawn of something called second wave feminism, and its leading spokesperson was Betty Friedan, and she was a great champion of abortion rights, of equality rights. But when it came to LGBT, she wasn't so hot. In fact, Friedan declared that homosexuality is not what the women's movement is about. And she even referred to lesbians as the lavender menace. Well, now that led to an exit of many lesbian feminists from the second wave feminist movement. And they set up their own group, which they called the Lavender Menace. Now, this was nothing compared to the looming bust-up that was on the horizon between some second-wave feminists and transgender people. Now, trans people, even in the 1960s, 1970s, were already calling for legal recognition outside of the binary categories of male and female. And also at the time, remember that gays and lesbians were also calling for their legal rights. So what second-wave feminists who were opposed to trans rights argued was that you don't become a woman, or you cannot feel that you're a woman. You are either inherently a woman or not. They even argued that male to female transgender people always retained a sense of male privilege, and this was even evidenced by them demanding equal rights. And then there were some second-wave feminists who took the argument a stage further. They came up with a deductive syllogism that goes something like this: all men are rapists. All male to female transgender people are basically men. Therefore, all male to female transgender people are essentially rapists, like all men. And this logic underscores the whole argument around locker rooms and toilets. Let's just say that the debate got more and more heated. It was as if they had to up the ante continuously. So we have Professor Janice Raymond in 1979 bringing out a book called TheTranssexual Empire. This is in 1979, by the way. And she's arguing in that book, amongst many things, that transgender people appropriate female bodies. Now, this being the 1970s and 1980s, many feminists were on the political left, even the Marxist-influenced left. So what some of them did was to try and put, if you want, a Marxist spin on it. What they said was that transgender people were essentially confused or victims, that instead of changing society, they were changing themselves. And this was an example, if you want, of neoliberalism gone mad. What they should be doing was trying to change the whole of society instead of mucking around with their own bodies. Just to give this socialist take even more credibility, they argued that the whole transgender thing was essentially a money-making ruse by surgeons and the pharmaceutical industry. Now, needless to say, transgender people haven't welcomed this avalanche of criticism and, frankly, insults from second-wave feminism, but also they've long felt marginalized by most LGBT people. In fact, they long felt erased from LGBT history. For example, the 1969 Stonewall riots, where their role has often been entirely ignored. Now, I think there's a grain of truth to this. I certainly remember as a gay man in the 1980s and 1990s that transgender people were very much on the margins of the movement. So it's to be welcomed that they're getting visibility. Oh no, it's not, according to trans-exclusionary radical feminists who feel that giving people more rights as transgender people is, if you want, taking away from women's rights. When trans rights advance, women's rights retreat. That is the logic. So worked up have some feminists become that they're even prepared to form alliances with far-right groups and even the Catholic Church against trans people, even though these allies are opposed to abortion rights and equality. So we have the crazy situation in Spain, where feminists are now sharing a platform with the Catholic Church and Vox, which is the main far-right party, to oppose trans rights, even though their allies are firmly opposed to abortion rights and also to gender equality. And we see a situation in the United States and the United Kingdom where anti-trans feminists have formed alliances with anti-trans conservatives. But you don't have to Google very far, particularly with the United States, to find these conservatives admitting quite openly that this is part of a strategy to take on LGBT rights in total. They're going for the T first, and then they'll work their way on to the L, the G, and the B. Also, of course, they're opposed to women's rights. We've seen Roe versus Wade overturned, but this doesn't seem to deter the anti-trans feminists getting into bed with these people. In my view, this is one of many ways in which traditional political boundaries and battle lines are being blurred and confused in our modern age. I'd like to know what you think about the evolution of certain elements within feminism towards this anti-trans position and the alliances that they have been forming. It's incredibly interesting. How we unpick this, I don't know, but tell me what you think.